All right, it looks like we're teeing up here, and it says we are now live. So welcome, everybody. I want to welcome you to today's edition of Modern Workplace Fire Away Friday. Today is 10/5/2018, and I am your host, Michael Giannotti. We have got a packed show. In fact, I forgot to put these on because it's Friday, and Friday today, with everything we got to talk about, is so bright. Just gotta wear shades. No, but seriously, we do have a packed show today. We're going to be taking a look at the top three and coming out of Microsoft's Ignite conference. Some great stuff there that we're going to talk about. We also are going to be diving into Microsoft Teams and associated tabs in it to take a look at where data is, what that looks like from a compliance standpoint, and then how do you manage that on the back end around governance, e-discovery, data retention, all that good stuff, whether it's in Stream Planner, Forms, whatever. We're going to talk about it all today. So, like I said, we do have a packed day. A couple of things before we kick off. In the upper right-hand corner, as you're looking in your browser, you'll notice a little icon that kind of looks like a chat window, but with an overlay with a question mark. If you select that, click on it, it will open up. If it's not already open for you, it'll open the Q&A panel. In the Q&A panel, you can post questions. You can give shout outs. We love to hear from you. Who are you? Where are you watching from? And it's Far Away Friday, so ask me anything you want. I may not answer it at the exact moment, but I will definitely, I see them as they come up here in my preview. Today's stream is being brought to you by Microsoft Live Events, and we are using Microsoft Teams to deliver this publicly through anonymous access. So if you haven't seen that, take a look, and we'll actually mention that real quickly. So let's go ahead and move on. You'll see me glance here from side to side occasionally, just so you know. That's where my slides are. So we'll go ahead and take a look at today's agenda. We're going to kick it off by looking at the Modern Workplace top three, right? What are, in my opinion, three of the biggest things from the last 2 weeks? Like I said, there is tons of stuff. We'll take a look at my top three. Then we're going to dive into our Modern Workplace tips, which is today our deep dive. We are really doing an IT focused session. This is bits and bytes and what's where and how do you manage and how do you set up policies and all that kind of good stuff on the back end. Next week's will be a end user focus for business users. Then after that, we'll wrap up and next session. But this is a Modern Workplace Fire Away Friday. So like I said, as we go through today's presentation, if you have questions at any time, you have shout outs, go ahead and fire them away. And again, I'll talk about this as we go through, in the upper right-hand corner of your browser, you'll see a little blurb window. It looks kind of like one of those cartoon ones and it has a question mark on it. That is the chat window. If you select that, open it up, you'll be able to go ahead and post questions. Say hi, let me know who you are or where you're from. You don't have to say your last name. You can be anonymous. It's all good. So with that, let's go ahead and kick into our Modern Workplace top three. And we're going to start off with number one of my favorite topics. What's new in Microsoft Stream at Ignite? So there was a ton of stuff coming out around Stream. I actually had a great time just this week. I was in California. Spent the day with a customer out there, taking a look at Microsoft Stream, live events, how all that works. But a couple of things that they talked about with some of the new capabilities going into GA for delivering live events. You'll be able to take a look at that via the link below. And of course, I'll supply this at the end. When we post the archive of today's video, we'll have a PDF with all the slides and the links, so don't worry, as well as additional ones that we cover today. So number one, live events. If you haven't seen live events, it absolutely rocks. We're doing that right now via Microsoft Teams, publicly anonymous access. That in and of itself is getting a major ramp up in Q4, and they talked about some of that. But you can also deliver live events using any RTMP client software or hardware, like a new tech TriCaster, for example, or something free for your desktop like OBS, which allows you to broadcast and do green screen knockouts, etc. So that was one of the first things. But live, they're now bubbling that up through Microsoft Stream, through Yammer. If you want to have enriched jams for user engagement, for executive internal user engagement, where they can really start to gain the pulse of the organization, that is a great way to go. And it all has integration into SharePoint, which was great to see. Also, watch videos on the go, even when you're offline. So they announced the new mobile client at Ignite. That came out. It is out for Android. It is coming to iOS. I have to wait for mine. But we'd love to know. I see we have a couple of new viewers just dropped in. As I said earlier, if you want to give a shout out, you have a question at any time, upper right-hand corner, the little, it's a little kind of cartoon dialog box. If your Q&A panel is not open, click that, it'll open it up. You can fire away questions, shout out, say hello. Moving on, quickly catch up on missed meetings. So this is a great feature if you've been using it in preview like I have. It's been a great feature. You know, in the past with Skype, you could have a meeting and select to record, but it recorded it locally on that machine. Then it had to process, you then pushed it up to the cloud, and then people accessed it. Now we're doing cloud service side recording that appears, and then you can just tag it to drop it into any channel group and have that automatically show up in your team for your members. So if they miss the meeting, they'll be able to catch up. That also brings me down. I'm going to go ahead and just drop to, we've rolled this out now. Stream is also now being made available for small business. So pretty much you got Office 365, any kind of business piece, you have Microsoft Stream. But finally, and this is a big one, and when I told my customer this week earlier when I was out in California, they got very excited. All capabilities move to additional Office 365 plans. In other words, the very cool cognitive services pieces like full text index and searching within a video. That's there now. You got E3. We don't care. You can use it, right? Also, facial recognition. A certain speaker is on. You want to hit them, you'll be able to access that. That's all been rolled out. That's all available. So, you know, take a look. Like I said, after the video, after we do today's broadcast, I'll have these slides in a PDF format along with all links available. Take a look at the announcements. If you have questions, we'll cover those. Love to hear from you, and we'll see you then. So next up, that's number one. Number two, so we go from Stream to Teams, which go together like a hand in a glove. And so Modern Workplace number two, and this really, the headline is, Teams is now officially the fastest growing business app for Microsoft in our company's history. So today, I mean, look at the stats. I'm looking over here so I can see it a little bigger. Otherwise, I have to put on my readers. But if you take a look at those stats there, 329,000 plus, right? It's already outdated. 329,000 organizations are now using Teams. 87 of the Fortune 100 companies are using Microsoft Teams. 44 languages are supported, and 54 customers have 10,000 or more active users. That's not licensed users, people actively using it on a regular basis. I see we have a couple more people just joined in. Just so you know, if you have questions as we go through, if you want to just say hi, give a shout out where you're from, upper right-hand corner, if you're not already seeing the Q&A panel on the right, there's a little cartoon dialog box. Click that, and it will open it up. You can fire anonymous. You can give your name, first name, or whatever. Questions at any time, as well as we love to hear from you where you're watching from. We've had people from Germany, Brazil, Japan, wherever. We love to hear. So moving on, a couple of other things in Teams. So not only is it the fastest growing, but they had some great announcements and some new features. Number one, new tools for meeting. background blur. So I'm not doing that here because we're doing a broadcast, but one of the things that has been requested when people have sensitive data, let's say I have a whiteboard in back of me or some other information that might be sensitive, or it might be confusing or whatever, mess, you don't want to show it. Background blur, you can now select that and it will do kind of a knockout. It's basically like a chroma key. It takes the person, knocks out the background and blurs it, right? So that's number one. Meeting recordings, I've already talked about in the context of stream, but being able to record those meetings, that was announced as well. Video cloud interop for people who need to connect with some systems and having that set up. And we announced some of our partners like Blue Jeans and others who are providing those services. I see we have some more people that just joined. So again, this is all great as we get ready to go into tips. But if you look in the upper right-hand corner, little cartoon dialog box will allow you to click, open. And I see Rebecca from Culver City, California. Bam. Hello, Rebecca. It's great to see you and glad that you're here today. So, you know, again, you can go ahead, you can say hello, give a shout out, you can ask a question at any time. This is Fire Away Friday. Next, new capabilities in Teams for first line workers. This is awesome, and it was something asked. So we had a lot of customers. I deal with healthcare, right? Healthcare and life sciences. And so if, you know, you would expect that in both those scenarios, there are first line workers, for example, or shift workers. If you think about people working at a hospital, a shift, anywhere from a maintenance person to a nurse on the floor, etc. Staff Hub was something we were getting lots of interest around. People were asking, when are you going to add Staff Hub as a tab and make it all seamless and put it in there, etc.? Well, they took it one step further. They have taken the elements of Staff Hub and they're now going to be rolled out. You can take a look if you click, like I said, the link after the fact, you'll be able to go there. But they're incorporating that directly into Microsoft Teams for those groups. In fact, for my demo environment, I just enabled that environment, and that's going to go live and start to show up shortly. Also, new capabilities around HIPAA. And again, this is very important for the healthcare and life sciences to enable clinicians to communicate with patients about data. A couple of things they've added within there. Number one, image annotation right in Teams. From here, right? So I'm in my mobile app and I need to annotate an image, maybe an MRI, etc. I'll be able to do it right from within here. Also, priority notifications. This is big, right? If you have groups, you have a team set up of nurses, etc. Maybe there's something urgent that you need to do an alert to the group or to an individual. You need to alert that individual, catch their attention, and you send them an IM. They don't see it right away. Well, you can continue. If you do a priority alert, it'll continue every couple of minutes to alert them for up to 10 minutes to ensure that catches their attention. We also announced new certified devices for Microsoft Teams. Big one. Again, if you're doing something like live events, now you have certified devices. I wish I had one. But Logitech, for example, has like the Rally Cam. That's just a beautiful thing for doing both conferences and webcasts. But there's a whole range of now certified devices, including phones for Microsoft Teams. They've also improved developer tools, but more about that again after today's broadcast. If you come back, I'll have the archive posted with the PDF of these slides and the links that you can take a look at. Moving on from the last one of my top three, and there we go. SharePoint. So I started with SharePoint many years ago with Microsoft. Was working with the product team at my old company before it got the nickname, before it got the pre-release name of Tahoe, and then came on board right after the release of 2001. So I love SharePoint, love it, and there was tons of new stuff around SharePoint. This is just a few of the announcements around that, and again, a link, but a couple of big things that were announced that you should be taking a look at. Number one, some new stuff around improving employee engagement and making stuff sticky, right? And I do see we got some more attendees. Thank you. If you want to give a shout out, have a question, upper right-hand corner, there's a little cartoon dialog box, just like Rebecca recently used to say hi from Culver City, California. You can come in, you can say hi, let me know where you're from, ask a question, Fire Away Friday. So some of the things that they've done to make it much richer. Number one, they've announced new page designs, again, to make things much more attractive and using responsive design. Number two, new web parts that are coming out. They've continued to add to those with all kinds of the ability to pull in rich media, external social, even things like, heck, if you've got a Kindle, right, and you need to share, you want to share to your organization, maybe one of the people in your org wrote a book on, I don't know, if it could be a physician on new patient care, new paradigm. It could be on the new way of working together at an exploration around research and development for new drugs, et cetera, medical devices, whatever the case might be. You can actually share that. So new parts are out, new links of as far as for creating and treating external news sources as if they're internal and providing that. Audience targeting has been asked for personalization, so you can target content to particular groups in your org, and organizational news publishing that will show as an organizational post, and you can actually have it, a little icon, etc., to highlight that. Also announced personalized views. This kind of goes around that personalization, right? Things so that people can see where, you know, as they go throughout recent documents, their recent sites, personalized news delivery to them. That was announced, and we have more around that you'll be able to take a look at. Microsoft on our homepage has a mega menu, and I had customers all the time saying, why can't we have that? And it was always, well, that's custom, blah, blah. No longer. We've announced some additional pieces. Number one, the mega menu. If you want a mega menu for your org, bam, there you go. We put that out. Also, a new custom footer that you can have, and a new Yammer web part that's a much richer one, and it's been much requested for richer view of the data. And again, I see some more attendees just joined. If you look in the upper right-hand corner of the Microsoft Teams frame here in the browser, you'll see a little icon. Looks kind of like a cartoon dialog box. Click that, you'll get the right-hand side. You can post any questions, just give a shout out, who you are, where you're from, etc. Love to hear from you. But that's available for everyone. All right, last, this is cool. We're in Teams right now. I'm using Teams to deliver this live broadcast. Enhanced Teams integration from SharePoint end, and we're doing it a couple of ways. Number one, SharePoint list is a tab, and it will pull out the Chrome. Actually, instead of doing it as a web page and messy, it's going to provide a nice, neat view of that list. And think of all the stuff that opens up now. If you wanted to go into that underlying SharePoint in the group, and you have a power user who can create killer lists that are really applications, those can now be displayed as tab in Teams. That was announced. Also, let's see, add Teams apps to SharePoint sites. I thought this was really cool. You know, as you create these different apps, you'll be able to add that to there. New link to Teams in the site nav. If you're in a a SharePoint site, you'll be able to see a link back to the Teams right from within there. And then finally, I love this, being able to connect a SharePoint site to Teams quickly and on the fly. And they showed both adding one from the Teams view as well as from SharePoint itself. So there's a whole lot more. I'd be here for an hour or more just talking about those things. Again, the link that you see here will publish out the slides after today's broadcast. You'll be able to take a look, and I'll have all the links plus anything else we reference. I saw Rebecca has asked, will calendar lists display in a list tab? I'm glad you asked that. So I'm assuming you're talking about a SharePoint calendar, right? Not a Outlook calendar, but a SharePoint calendar. So if you create, and I actually have I was with a customer the other day, not the one in California, but another who actually was doing that. They went into their underlying SharePoint, created a calendar, SharePoint one, to do some things kind of as part of their application and workflow, things that they wanted to display and do. And then it was just add a tab. Yeah, so absolutely, it's add a tab, and there you go. That's That's where it's at. If that's not what you were asking, if you can clarify, we'll take that a step further. All right, moving on. So that's my top 3. Again, announcements around Stream, Teams, and SharePoint. There was tons more. I didn't even talk about the new Microsoft Search, which is the ramifications of that is earth-shaking. I was talking with a client about that the other day. We had a long conversation about that, but the new SharePoint Search, there's so many others, but again, I'll have links to that. You're welcome, Rebecca. She said, thanks. And we're going to go ahead and move on to today's main topic. So I titled this Data Governance in Microsoft Teams, and I forgot, write a descriptive. That's my template, and I didn't write my description. Boom, it's Friday. I need coffee. Here's your description. So, data governance of Microsoft Teams. This is what kind of set this up. I have been getting requests from a number of customers who have either moved to the cloud or are moving to the cloud, who have rolled out Teams or are in the process of rolling out Teams, and are then looking at enabling, making sure people have access to all these other tab services. And as a part of that, I've been getting a lot of questions like, gee, Mike, we're going to turn on forms, let them have forms as a tab in Teams. What does that mean from a compliance standpoint? Where's the data? Is it, what's going on? How do we manage these things, etc.? So we're going to take a look at a couple of things. We're going to take a look at Microsoft Teams itself, where the data is, talk about compliance, governance of its proper data, what's there. Then we're going to dive through some of the main tabs that I've been getting questions about and that I keep seeing come up again and again and again with other customers. We'll go through all that, then we'll open up actually the administrative interface for the Admin Center in Office 365. We'll take a look in there, how you can set some of these controls. We'll talk about where some of the announcements, like one of the ones around Teams and DLP, where that's going to reside. I'll show you that. And then we'll walk through some of that because it's not all in the same place, right? And then we'll take your questions as we go through. So let's go ahead and start. So let's talk about baseline Microsoft Teams. And I love this graphic. When it first came out, it was a great one. In fact, it's getting cut off here in my little design view that I did. But if we take a look, a couple of different things that get highlighted. When we talk about Teams, there's a couple of baseline things that come out. First of all, in your right-hand or left-hand side, you get the chat functionality. That's that personal chat, right? You might have one-on-one, you might pull a couple of people together. But where's that data? And we'll talk more about this in a bit, but the data resides for those when we talk about that. The conversations are in Exchange. They go into those personal email boxes, and any attachments of documents go in OneDrive, which gets into a dependency. A lot of my orgs, they ask, more on the hospital end, they're slowly turning stuff on. They look and they say, well, OneDrive, okay, what if I don't have OneDrive? Well, then there's nowhere for an attachment to go. So there's ramifications around what's enabled or disabled with that. On the Teams end, when we set up a team, a couple of baseline things take place. Number one, you get a Conversations tab, that's front and center. Next, you get the Files tab, and then you get the Wiki. That data, again, is pretty simple. It's stored when we work with that in the Conversations. That's Exchange. Remember, a mailbox is created for the group. You get a group under the hood, an Office 365 group, and the conversations then are stored in that email mailbox for the group. Around Files, underneath as a part of the group, we get SharePoint. So all files are actually stored in a SharePoint document library, and out of the box, you get a library. If you create channels, you don't get additional libraries, you get folders. If you actually open up the library and go to the top level of it, you would see with the creation of a team, you'll get a general folder. And then as you create channels, whatever those channel namings are, you'll get additional folders in there. So we use a document library, and then we use folders within that for the various channels, the general and then subsequent ones. So all your files are stored there. The wiki is part of SharePoint, right? That underlying infrastructure. But as a part of that, that means, you know, we're not using anything new here. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, and we'll show it as we get into a deeper dive around the admin center and the security center. But there's nothing new here. So when we talk about things like e-discovery for documents, those repositories are already available, right? They're already there. It's SharePoint. And you'll see that when I open up and show you e-discovery and setting up an e-discovery run. So we can do that. Legal hold, same thing. I mean, it's Exchange at SharePoint is the data. Compliance content, when we start looking at things like, you know, data retention, archival, audit logs. We're not talking about any new infrastructure. We're talking about existing. Now, there are some things that are coming down the pike, like DLP for those conversations specifically, right? That is coming, and we'll talk about that, and we'll see that. But as you can see, from a SharePoint baseline, when we create a Teams baseline, when we create a Microsoft team, we're not using anything new. So already those things that we put into place, leveraging the security center from an IT standpoint, it's all pertinent and available to us. All right, moving on. A couple of things to keep in mind as we get into this. I'm not going to spend much time. You can have the slides after. But, you know, when we really start to talk about some of the compliance governance capabilities of our data in Microsoft Teams, we really need to think about what's the licensing and what we want to do. So as you can see here, for example, in-place e-discovery or archival, right? That comes with E3 and E3 and above. When we talk about in-place e-discovery, same thing. Advanced e-discovery, which is a whole other that allows us to extend beyond and also use analytics, predictive algorithms, and some things that we do with machine learning there. That's a part of E5. Legal hold, again, E3 and above. Compliance, content search, E3 and above. Auditing and reporting, we do get that across the board, right? So any stuff that's out there, we get auditing and reporting. Conditional access, we can leverage because it's actually some of that's independent. So just important to keep in mind, really, when I talk to you, when we talk to organizations, if they want to leverage people in a less than E3 mode, they really need to think about what do they want to do for those users in terms of security and compliance and the governance of that data. And that really does pertain to Teams, as with all the 365 infrastructure. All right, so that's baseline. And again, we'll take a look at that in the center in just a bit. But what about those other tabs? These are where I've been getting all my questions of late. The other stuff's kind of table stakes. Organizations understand that, they get it, or they can get it pretty quickly because it's pretty basic, right? But there's so many other things. So we're going to take a kind of walk through quickly around a couple of pieces. Number one, we're going to take a look at Forms, To Do, Power Apps, Flow, Stream, Power BI, and Sway. Those are the ones where I've been getting questions repeatedly. Oh, and Planner. I forgot to list that here. We are going to take a look at Planner. We'll talk about that. I do have a slide with some information about that. But we're going to dive into each of those, talk through what they're going to get. So as you add those tabs to Teams, you'll know where the data is it compliant, what's going on with that. So the first off is Microsoft Forms, right? First of all, for Forms, all data is here in the US, except for European-based tenants. That's the only exception. We're not doing it in Asia at this time. It's either US bound, the data, or it's in a European tenant. and that's a European tenant who started using forms after, say, May 2017, right? So prior to that, it was all just US. I actually had some customers say, we can't use forms because we've got now a European tenant. They're in a, they have a global tenant, global setup, and they have European-based sub areas. That's no longer the case. When we bind that data, their forms will be in those European tenants. So that is available. Next, Microsoft Forms data, and this you're going to hear repeatedly, and I'm going to explain why. Follows the Office 365 compliance framework and meets compliance category C as outlined in the framework. I'm going to provide a link to this. I mean, we have it right here, but I'm going to put a separate one in the archive post. So a lot of these services, as they move data and where the databases are stored, it is part of the Office 365 services, right? We're not storing something else out there. It is category C for compliance. So that's important to note. With category C, that gives you a level of assurance that if you're approached by auditors, regulators, that you can provide them the documentation if you're leveraging this service, and the appropriate information can be provided for them for compliance sake. So Forms does fall under that. We also, in this case, meet not all of these do, but Forms meets GDPR compliance requirements as of May of this year. Prior, we didn't. Now we do. So we have a whole piece around data subject requests for GDPR information around that for Forms, so you can take a look with that piece. And it's saying connection to the server is lost. I'm assuming that's this piece here, not my stream. All right, I hope so. Hopefully my internet here isn't bugging out. All right, also it meets FERPA and BAA protection standards. That's a unique thing with Forms. And I think it's important, again, you can take a look. The people who deal with this in your org, those are important things for them to have. They understand what that means. And they need to have that set of assurance, because a lot of times people just turn off Forms saying, well, it doesn't look like most of my other data in 365. I don't know what it's doing, so I can't. Again, we have links into the different areas for your security folks, for your compliance folks. But Forms is a great tool that you should not be turning off. You can control what people do with it, how they do it. And somebody said still good here. Thank you, whoever said that. So my stream's running. I think it's to my Q&A service. It's going deep. All right. I have some additional links here around Forms, where you can see around how to set up frequently asked questions, how to turn it on or off. I use Forms all the time. In fact, I'm using it for our blog now, not on the blog, but for our internal group as I'm onboarding and training people. We actually have a request form. I use Forms for people to get authorization to be a blogger on our public facing end. So Forms is great. You can use it internally and externally. And they announced, I believe, at Ignite, Forms is coming out for consumer use as well. But be assured, just because it's consumer use, and you'll see this in Sway, some references to that, just because it's consumer does not mean that yours is commingled with consumer. Yours is a part of your tenant, and the data is stored, as I said, either in the US or Europe, depending upon where we're talking. That's Forms. If you have questions, you can post them, but we'll keep on going. Next, Microsoft To Do. Another one of those ones people say, oh, this is pretty cool. And we had announcements. We just had some the other day. I saw Naomi Mennepenny posted a thing around To Do, and I was like, oh, bam. Integration into Teams and tasks and my Exchange calendar, having all that show. So a couple of things. Where's the data? Number one, Microsoft To Do, it uses Exchange Online for data storage and synchronization. Now, if you're using this tied to a consumer account, like I have here on my phone, we have it tied to our family MSN. It's we have an old account from way back, MSN. It looks like Cortana there, doesn't it? I just noticed that. I have a ring light here to give a little bit better light on my face. But at any rate, having said that, so I have mine tied to my consumer account, so it's actually stored in that consumer instance for email and Outlook Online, right, for a consumer. But from a 365 standpoint, it's going to be tied to your Exchange server. To-dos are stored, it says, as tasks in Exchange Online mailbox. Also, the web app is hosted, you can see here at todo.microsoft.com, and it's considered a service from a compliance perspective, right? It's one of our 365 services. So it's part of that general one. Again, we developed this according to industry standards for audits. So we have audits around that for service organization controls and type 1 audits for those who need to know. Though it's not explicitly mentioned, and this is important for my healthcare customers with HIPAA, right? In our online service terms and in the HIPAA Business Associates Agreement, we thought that ring was your halo. It's my halo. Ooh. I don't know. Maybe I might have horns. Who knows with me. Yeah. So it was just a comment back. So what I was saying here is it's not explicitly called out to do under both online service terms or under the HIPAA language. However, keep in mind, it's Exchange. It's just Exchange data. It is a front end to Exchange, whether that's the consumer version of Outlook Online or whether it's your Exchange Online for 365. It's all it is, right? So that's where and that is represented in both documents. So the data is a part of that. It's just not explicitly called out. If you want to check out more, again, I have links around that, reviewing data storage and compliance in To-Do. There's a whole section around that, and you can take a look at it. And then getting started with it, it's a great thing. I live out of it every day. I'm getting older. I forget things. I'm multitasking constantly. I use Today to organize what I got to do every day and cycle it on through. And you might want it too. And if you have questions about that, feel free to ask, but we're going to continue to move on. Next up. Oh, and by the way, if you want questions or comments, and I'm getting them in here, which is great. Again, if you're not seeing on the right-hand side, the Q&A panel, upper right-hand corner, the little cartoon kind of dialog box. On mine, it shows a little question mark. If you click it, boom, it'll open up and you can post your questions, shout out, say hi, or ask anything on Fire Away Friday. So Power Apps. Power Apps rocks. Power Apps allows business users to create applications that will render on a phone, an iPhone, an Android phone, a tablet, a PC, a Mac, right at once, have it show up everywhere. You don't have to publish a whole separate thing to the Apple Store or Google Play or any of that, because the application itself is certified. You merely create the app and share it, and it's available to those users. But it connects to all kinds of stuff. You can create and set up Power Apps that, for example, connect and allow you to move content from SharePoint to Dropbox or Google Docs. I mean, who'd have thunk, right? A few years ago, that'd have been unheard of. But you can do all that with Power Apps. As a result, when we talk about where does data reside, well, it depends. So, number one, there's a whole bunch of out-of-the-box connectors to store data in places like SQL, Dropbox, SharePoint, many other platforms. Where that data is stored depends on the Power App itself and where it's pulling from or rendering to. So that's the first piece to keep in mind with Power Apps as you set up policies and procedures and investigate that. And I do have, there's a Power Apps and Microsoft's Common Data Mode. Maybe you're going to set up common, these connections that people can readily consume that you control, and then make it very easy for them to do that. But take a look at that link afterwards. In Power Apps also, Canvas apps use usually external information stored in cloud services, different data stores, right, that are out there. So, they have a common example is a table and Excel file stored in a OneDrive for business. Apps use these using connections. And again, you're going to have to, you can control, you can moderate what they're going to be able to connect to and do all that. but it's important that you understand that. So, again, we have data subject rights request around customer data. That's there. You can administer Power Apps and what people can use. Take a look at that. So Power Apps, extremely powerful. That's why we call it Power Apps. It's very powerful, enabling the business to create very rich applications. But you want to make sure that you control and understand the data sources that you're allowing or not allowing to. So just some food for thought there. Little bit of a different animal. Microsoft Flow, which goes hand in hand with Power Apps. Workflow, though it's not dependent on it. Flows are stored in Azure, right? So as with Office 365, much of our stuff is quote unquote Azure under the hood, right? We have a tenant and we store different things. And it says your flow is deployed in the region that hosts the environment. For example, if your environment is created in a Europe region, your flow is deployed to the Europe data centers there for Azure. So they have a FAQ around regions for Microsoft Flow. Take a look and then you can understand where we're doing that. Also, we do have Flow audit events, and I'm going to show you the audit where we do auditing, the audit logs anyways, because it's hugely important as you take a look at what data is coming from where, what actions are happening. The audit logs very rich and including many views into many of the different applications that people are looking for and maybe not aware that it's available. In fact, usually when I go and show customers like, well, I didn't know that was there. So Flow is one of those that shows up, right? So you can take a look around auditing events in Flow. As an administrator, it says you don't want flows that get data from an internal such as OneDrive or SharePoint that contains, for example, salary information and then post that data publicly. So you can use data loss protection with Flow to control which services share data within your Flow deployment. And they have a whole link around that. Again, we could spend, an hour probably on just that topic alone. I have a link to data loss prevention DLP policies for Flow. You want to take a look at that. So it's not so much should you allow Flow or not, but what are you going to allow with Flow? Leverage DLP for Flow. You'll be very glad you didn't. If you didn't know you could, now you do. Also, responding to GDPR requests, there's a whole section around that, but we do provide for that. So we have that. And then I have a link to additional Flow documentation, just because Flow is powerful. It's a great tool and you should get familiar with it if you are not. Moving on, my favorite application, Microsoft Stream. So, when I do talk to clients, they understand that we're leveraging Azure Media Services under the hood to power Stream. That's where we do all the work on the video. We trail Azure Media Services and capabilities, taking advantage of those as it makes sense and incorporating them into the Stream service. Like cognitive services is something that comes out of Azure Media Services. We've had that forever, full text indexing and transcription. Some of the new stuff with translation coming up, that's a part of that. Closed captioning, that's coming from Azure Media Services. Facial recognition is another Azure Media Services cognitive service capability. And there's many more in Azure Media, but those are some of the ones that we're surfacing. Having said all that, even though we're there, right, not a part of what we think of, it's not the old SharePoint and, dropping and doing progressive playback, it's true streaming. It is Tier C compliant in the Office 365 compliant framework, so you can take a look at that, and that's important for those folks that need to understand that. And there are new things coming about. I'll show you, we've added a whole bunch in the Audit Center around that. We now also have being able to pull up, and I'll show you some of the data back-end views around that in just a moment. And there's an FAQ. Power BI, I'm going to kind of go through this quickly because I want to get into the admin center and some of the other pieces. So it's built on Azure. Again, the data, we talk about data being stored in Azure blobs, Azure SQL databases, at rest and in transit encryption, all that's there. And you can see more about that in our security white paper. We talk about encryption keys for Power BI. So I have information, you'll be able to take a look there. But the point is, again, Power BI falls under our same level C compliance and being able to take a look at that. I'm almost done here. This is one that has changed quite a bit that a lot of orgs turned off, and it's a great tool and you shouldn't have it off because it is compliant. It's changed a lot over the last 2 years. So Sway data is stored in Azure within the United States. They're working on expanding that, but the data is here, but you can prove data residency and where it resides, right? Data storage, by the way, does not count against your OneDrive for business storage quota. So when a person creates one, just so you know, it's not going against that. There is a commercial version and a consumer version. Do not confuse them, although they look and act the same. So Sway creation looks and feel whatever one you're in. However, there are some differences. Number one, content sources on the insert tab are tailored for 365 commercial users. They do tailor that. By default, Sways can only be viewed by others in your org, and you can control whether you even allow people to externally publish a Sway. So it is confined to your organization, whereas the outside ones, it's the opposite, right? Next, built-in sharing options are scoped for commercial use. So again, you can turn that on or off, control that type of access. Global admins can also turn off Sway for individual users, as well as disable external sharing. But that way you can still leverage it for publishing, but maybe not for user, so people can consume. Maybe your CorpCom people might use them to create some real rich Sways for presenting data and information, capturing events, etc. And then everybody can consume, but not everybody can create. We've also added password protection to Sways. We have more content that they've added now, and removing the Sway informational footer. So because again, it's going to be branded for your company, that's there. You can see there's some additional information around Sway on this piece. On this whole compliance thing though, this is important because I got hit with this twice in the last month, and it is not the case anymore. So Sway now supports encryption in flight, and it always did in flight, but it was not encrypted at rest in its first iteration. But as of December 7th, it is, right? December 7th of 17. So we're almost 2 years in, of encryption at rest. So, if you were worried about that, and I did get hit with that twice, 2 different orgs in the last month, that's now there. So that should not be a hang-up. Also, it meets compliance category C, again, part of the compliance framework, so you can take a look at that. And then I have some additional information for admins and setting up their settings. Last but not least, Microsoft Planner. I get asked about Planner all the time. First of all, Planner is the plans are associated with a 365 group, right? And the files that are there, they're stored in that SharePoint doc library as a part of that group. Metadata is then a part of the 365 service. It does meet compliance C framework. We publish that. We guarantee you that for you, the customer. That's part of our, agreement with you, and the ability when you're audited and you have regulators coming in. So it is a compliance C compliant service. Again, files are stored in the associated group, and the metadata is a part of the 365 service itself. All right, so I got about 12 minutes left. We can stay longer if needed. I'm happy to see everybody hanging on here, but we're going to take a walk through the Security and Compliance Center. We're also going to look at Stream Admin view, and also the Teams Skype new console, because there's some settings there. But I did put a picture here I want to quickly highlight around DLP. So DLP today, with DLP, information that is being stored in OneDrive and SharePoint In other words, files, right, in that group, etc., it's already accounted for. We can already set that up and work with it. Where we did not see it was Teams chats and channel messages, right? That was not there explicitly, and it was kind of goofy to if you wanted to set that up. It does not appear. You'll see it's not in mine yet. They announced it. It is coming. And you can click on the link after the fact to see when, but it is being called out as something explicitly unique. So I'm going to exit this, and we're going to go over to our 365 center. And so you can see here we are for my demo tenant, and under the settings, we've got a bunch of information set up. We have different reports, usage, security and compliance, but we're going to go to the Security and Compliance Center to take a look at Teams and some of the other things that we're doing here to be able to allow you to take a look at what's happening in your org. First thing, data loss prevention. You know, setting up policies and providing for them. I showed you that today we can handle the SharePoint and all that. You know, I can come in if I want to set a policy, and I'll show you where this changes. So for example, since we're talking medical and health, maybe I want to do a HIPAA policy and we're going to do PII identifiers and medical terms. We'll select next. We could change the name if we wanted, give it a description. Then we choose the location. So first off, notice it says all locations, including, and I'm going to quickly log back in. It's going to make me sign in. Lovely. So let me enter my password. It's been sitting, not being actively used. There we go. So I will refresh these again, and those should come up. All right. So for our DLP policy, coming back quickly, we'll pick medical, we'll pick HIPAA, next, the locations. Important to note, again, it does not account for the Teams channel, you know, those chats for the Teams and their channels. So that's not there yet, but we'll pick specific so we can kind of see the breakout today. So again, for the files being stored, that is there. So we can choose all, or we can do specifics for a particular policy. Maybe there's a group that's doing specific type of information you want to flag or block. You could do that for those files. You could go ahead, remember, because under SharePoint sites, a group has a site that I can call out. So I can go ahead, I could set that, or I could exclude. So we get both of those. Coming soon, as I mentioned earlier, is the ability to have team chat and pieces. That's going to show right underneath here. So you'll see that soon. Finally, under the settings, you know, what are we going to do here? We can set some advanced, review our settings, and then apply that. And then that policy will go into effect. So elements of Teams are covered today. More coming down the pike, recently announced. Data governance. I do love it that we're providing a lot around here. So number one, under retention, again, if I need to retain content, right? This is very common within heavily regulated industries, data retention around certain types of content and locations. Teams is, you're going to see, we accounted for that here already. So I'll just say, this is my whatever, data retain. And we could give a description. How long do you want to retain, or do you want to delete? So we handle both retention and expiration here. So we can set that up very easily. We'll select next. Locations, take a look here. So, you know, the regular subjects are here: Office 365 groups, SharePoint sites, OneDrive accounts, and we already added Teams channel messages and Teams chats. So now we can go ahead and retain that data or expire, right? Remember, we had both. They announced at Ignite, they're going to allow you to be able to do expiration on team chats so it'll only be retained a day. You do lose the value of persistent chat, but there may be a team or teams or across all of yours. I have had some organizations that have said the ability, they don't want that, at least for now, from legal. My gut is they're going to get hit about that, but that's available. So you can set that up around data retention. So let's cancel out of there. I know we're running low on time. Data privacy. So we do have the GDPR dashboard, and it's important to note again when we go in here, if we want to open up and create a DSR case to look up in the right to be forgotten, we're going to look across all the content repositories we talked about previously. It all becomes available and is there. Search and investigation. Again, when we do a search, right? So I'm going to do a content search. I could have set up a case. But the same basic thing. If we want to come up here to do e-discovery, so we'll just say we're looking for generic Contoso. The term, I could add conditions. All locations allows me to search everything, but if we want to see what that looks like, notice again, when we select specific, I don't have anything selected. We have team messages here. We have team sites, and then Exchange public folders. So we allow for all of that, right? And notice this falls under the Exchange portion for messages, the team sites for SharePoint, because again, it's around files. That's available for you today. So again, if you need to do e-discovery on your SharePoint, on your team's content, it's there today. Notice we also have to do, we have My Analytics, Skype for Business, group email, all that because it's a part of Exchange. Remember, we talked about to do. So you can get to that content from here as well. If we come on back to our piece, in addition to that, audit logs. This is huge. So this is the one where I see people all the time not understanding where they can go ahead and run searches. So let's say we want to see and do a audit against our audit logs, against different content. Notice, we have things like files, compliance tag, folder activities, things we would expect, right? Who's shared, unshared folders, files, permissions, and activities on sites, RSS feeds, we got mailboxes. Now we get into some of the others. Sway's included in your audit logs. So all kinds of information about Sway there that we can go ahead and audit and then take action on. We have some additional, here's administrative ones that we can look at, roles, directory, e-discovery activities that we can take a look at, e-discovery content. Power BI is included in the audit logs. So we can go ahead and audit a ton around Power BI. Look at it, we're still in Power BI. For those using Kazala, they can do that. Teams is included in the audit logs. Look at all the things we have here around adding bots, removing tabs, added tabs, sign-ins, etc. Flow activities are here, and Stream is also included. A lot around Stream. So there is a wealth in the audit logs you can get to today for your users. From a Microsoft Stream standpoint, though, we get asked a lot about other things that people can do to around that data, because not all retention and all that is not there yet in the central. They announced things are coming, but some of the you will start to see more in security and admin there. But today it's not. We have a separate Streams administrative view, and it's important to note. The first person to see this is a global admin, but they can then add stream administrators. Typically, stream administrators are not the same as the people in your tenant admin center. So they can come here and do quite a bit around that. They can set up, number one, company policies and link that and have that available in here. We have usage detail. We have the ability around live events, who can and cannot set that up and who can run those. Content creation, you can absolutely restrict who can do that and restrict company-wide channel creation. Then down below, this is where we get into some of the things around, again, that compliance, governance, user data. Number one, manage user data. So you can run reports at any time around that. So you can, for example, get a, search on a name or an email and see all the content that they've gone ahead, that they've uploaded, that they have access to, the channels they've created, etc. if you need to take action on that. So we can provide reporting around all of that for you. And finally, on deleted users, you can look up deleted users and then permanently remove their content, or you can go ahead and edit their information to make so the data maybe is still valuable, but you don't want it associated with their name and publishing. You can go ahead and remove that and make it anonymous and stream. So that's available today. Again, there are more features that we saw coming. Some of that was announced at the stream piece. So, keep on the lookout. We'll be talking about that as we go. Finally, the last piece here I wanted to, and I know I'm right at the hour, but I'm going to quickly show you, if you have not seen it, here in the admin center. If you go down under our different centers, we have the new Teams and Skype one. And here, again, we can do things like messaging policies, right? So for Teams, we can set up policies around that. We have org-wide settings that we can do, like, for example, guest access. Do I want to allow guest access in Teams or not? And here's where I can control what they can do. I have additional team settings here on files, who can share, what kind of sources can we have. Again, if you want to govern that, maybe you don't want them having stuff in Dropbox or Box or Google Drive. You can get rid of that, right? So we have a range of settings there. We also have some things around call quality. And then finally, for first line workers, the setup is available today. It does fire off Staff Hub. That's all getting integrated though and quickly, so you will have that as well. We've run through a whole bunch, a lot of content. Obviously, in order to go into in-depth around any of this would take hours and hours and hours. So if you are interested in getting a better sense as to how to control the data, how to govern it, secure it in your organization, what's your next steps? Well, talk to your Microsoft rep. Get a TSP like myself, a collaboration TSP, a threat TSP, or an EMS TSP, or it might be a combination. But ask your Microsoft rep to schedule a session to come in with you. If you're in healthcare and life sciences, we would love to talk to you. I cover up here in the Northeast, but I have colleagues across the country that are doing work and would love to work with you and help you with your governance around how do you make sure you're compliant, how do you secure the data, expire data, and all that. Contact us, let us dive, and then take a look at how to implement it in your organization. I want to thank you for joining, but there are some next things. So next week is a user-focused broadcast, Modern Office, part 1 of 2. I'm going to have 2 of them. One's an IT focus. This one, though, is business focus. We're going to take a look at some of the new impactful features, et cetera, in Office. There's all kinds of stuff that makes users much more productive that we're going to take a look at and how they can be leveraging it, things with all the new cognitive services bubbling up in the Office applications, different machine intelligence, things that we're taking advantage of. We're going to look at all that and show you that. As always, after this broadcast today, I will take a PDF version of the slides, provide all the links that we've been talking about to you, so you can go ahead, you can share the broadcast, you can share just the content or specific links with your colleagues, but it'll be available for you to do so. I want to invite you, if you have not done so, to go to aka.ms/HLS blog. That's where you can, it's a shortcut to get to our Microsoft Healthcare and Life Sciences blog, where we announce upcoming broadcasts. I just onboarded a bunch of new content contributors this week that are going to be starting to publish. One just published one on Windows S for clinical workstations, and you're going to see much more content from many more contributors coming out over the next month or so. So take a look there. go ahead and follow the blog. I encourage you to follow it. That way you can keep up to date with what's going on. And if you have questions around, things around, if you want to see specific content in the future, if you have questions around collaboration in life sciences, you can join our community at aka.ms/HLS community. Again, that's all linked to the blog. It all goes together. So you can comment under blog posts, or you can comment right on the community page, top level page, and ask stuff, and we'll answer it there. But that's it. I want to thank you for joining us. Have a great week. I know we went 5 minutes over. I thank you for your patience and all the folks that stayed on. Join us next week again for Modern Office Part 1 of 2. But with that, this is Michael Giannotti for Modern Workplace Fire Away Friday for Healthcare and Life Sciences, and anybody else who cares to join. Bidding you have a great day, have a great weekend, take care, and as always, ciao. And we are going to sign off right now.